So welcome everybody. I'm going to introduce Varun Eknath, who's going to be giving the presentation today. And he's a private sector development analyst with the World Bank Group. He specializes in the field of international trade. He joined the Global Indicators Group of the Development Economics Vice-Presidency in March 2016 and is currently focused on designing and implementing indicators on international trade for the new Be Ready project, which is the subject of the webinar tonight. He's previously worked on the protecting minority investors topic for the Doing Business project and on issues of investment promotion and facilitation in the World Bank country offices of Kuala Lumpur and New Delhi. Before joining the World Bank in 2016, Varun was at the International Centre for Trade and Sustainable Development in Geneva. He holds a Master's in Law and Economics from the World Trade Institute in Switzerland and a degree in law from the National Law University in Delhi. His research interests are in the field of international economic law and international trade policy. But today, he's here to present the results of the new and recently released World Bank Be Ready 2024 report, which identifies trends and highlights key challenges in global trade. So we're very much looking forward to hearing from Varun. Thank you for your kindness in providing us with this briefing, Varun, and hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Wilson. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Again, on behalf of the Global Indicators Group and the new Be Ready report, I would like to thank the organizers, David, Mikhail, and the entire team at the INCU Secretariat for giving us this opportunity. In fact, our collaboration with INCU started a couple of months ago when we reached out to David and his team seeking assistance to identify some key experts for the first Be Ready report who would be able to assist us in our work on primary data collection, on international trade and aspects of trade facilitation. We were grateful that through the INCU network, we've been able to reach out to many trade professionals, customs professionals in particular, all over the globe, who are now our contributors. We're also happy today to call INCU as one of our global strategic partners. And to take our collaboration one step further, we're excited today to be given this opportunity, this platform to present and disseminate our work on Be Ready. We understand that many of you attending today's sessions maybe are experts contributing to our work and many others who we hope to work in the near future. Again, we extend a very warm welcome to each one of you to today's session. Today, I also have the honor of being joined by some of my esteemed colleagues. We have Nuno Mendes dos Santos, the topic lead for the international trade topic. We have Margarita Melio and Alex Belvelt with me today, and Mari Isabel, who's connected online. Both Margarita and Mari are members of INCU, if I'm not mistaken. And Mari, like some of you in the audience in her earlier life, was also a customs officer. So I will rely on their expertise and knowledge today as we will together do our best to respond to many questions that come our way during the Q&A sessions. To get the ball rolling and to get us underway, I'll be taking the next 50 minutes of your time and we'll take you through our newly developed indicators on international trade within the Be Ready report. As some of you may know, and for those who don't, the new Business Ready or the Be Ready report is a new data collection and analysis project of the World Bank Group that seeks to assess the business climate and investment climate worldwide, accompanied by a corporate flagship report, the Be Ready 2024 report, the first edition of which was published about a month ago on October 3rd and launched in our headquarters in Washington, D.C. The report is a key instrument of the World Bank's new strategy to accelerate and facilitate private investment, generate employment, and improve productivity to help economies accelerate and develop in an inclusive and sustainable way. It improves and develops upon what some of you may have known as the erstwhile Doing Business report. It provides an assessment across 10 topics. I'm just trying to lay down the foundation so that we can also get a sense of where international trade lies within this big ambit of the Be Ready report. So as I said, the Be Ready report encompasses and assesses 10 topic areas across the life cycle of the business, from starting a business, operating one, to its very closure. International trade is one among these 10 different topics. And today, it gives me, again, immense pleasure to be here speaking to you on one of Be Ready's, and in our opinion, one of Be Ready's most important topics, international trade. International trade, an area that touches our lives every day, from the food we consume, the clothes we wear. Life for all of us would look very different if it weren't for international trade. Again, the same is true for the private sector and the productive fabric of an economy. International trade has the potential to be a key driver of economic growth, and it's vital for private sector development. I could go on, but I fully recognize this audience does not need any further convincing about the importance of international trade. To take the session forward, I have today's agenda in front of you. So this is what I hope today's agenda would look like. We will start with a brief outline of the topic, then briefly touch upon the topic scoring, present the many indicators that are covered by the topic, discuss our different data sources, and hopefully leave ample time to be able to take you through and gauge your interest and attention towards the results of the first Be Ready 2024 report. With respect to the topic outline, the international trade indicator measures different aspects of international trade, trade in goods, services, and digital trade across 3 dimensions, which we refer to as pillars. On your screen, on the slides, you'll see that we have 3 different pillars across which the indicators of the international trade topic are distributed. The first pillar, also referred to as the regulatory framework pillar, assesses the quality of regulations for international trade, covering de jure features of a regulatory framework that are necessary to establish a non-discriminatory, transparent, and predictable environment to harness the potential of international trade. The second pillar, referred to as the one in public services, assesses the digital and physical infrastructure concerning international trade and the quality of border management, thus assessing the public services that are essential for international trade facilitation. The third pillar measures the time and cost to comply with import and export requirements, as well as participation in cross-border digital trade, as well as what firms in their perception perceive to be major obstacles for international trade. Each pillar is then further divided into subcategories, and each subcategory is then further divided into indicators, and each indicator pertains to one or several components. And to explain this a bit further, we'll move on to the next slide to understand what the scoring of the topic looks like. For those of you who may be interested in our scoring, I'll give a quick snapshot. Each of these 3 pillars that we referred to in the last slide has an equal weight in the topic score of 33%. As mentioned, pillar 1, which is the one on regulatory framework, includes 102 indicators and has a maximum nominal score of 180 points. These 180 points are then rescored to a range from 0 to 100. Similarly, 106 points are spread across pillar 2, across 53 indicators. And again, are rescaled up to 100 points. In pillar 3, each indicator obtains a score from 0 to 100, and then the total points for this pillar are calculated by summing up the scores in accordance with the weight of each category. The scores for each pillars are then averaged to obtain the final topic score for international trade. Some of you may wonder what acronyms on FFP and SDP on these slides mean. They refer to what we call firm flexibility points and social benefit points. And to zoom in a bit more, and again, for those of you who may be interested in our scoring, if we take the example of Pillar 1, we see that there's a total of 180 points based on 102 indicators. In most of these cases, scores will be assigned both on firm flexibility and social benefits, which means that the underlying good practice, which is the motivation for the development of our indicators, have a clear positive impact on firms' operation and society at large. However, there are, of course, certain exceptions. These include certain components on sustainable trade policy, international commitments on sustainable trade, technical NTMs, domestic freight transportation and restrictions on domestic freight transportation and logistics service providers, to name a few. If we had more time, I would have taken the opportunity to delve further into the different scoring methodologies that apply to firm flexibility and social benefits, but also to sort of take this discussion forward and to also make you aware of the many documents that the team has prepared. We have the methodology handbook of the Be Ready report, which from every topic length goes into much detail on how each indicator and each question is scored across these components on firm flexibility and social benefit. So today, my intent was just to give you a bit of a glimpse that we have indicators across different pillars, and each of them are assessed in terms of its impact on society at large, as well as its impact on firm operations. With that, I'll move on to the next slide. Again, going back a bit on Pillar 1 and sort of going through what Pillar 1 encompasses. We did mention earlier that Pillar 1 is the one that assesses the de jure aspects of international trade. It has 6 categories. The first, it has 6 subcategories, or two categories to put it differently. The first category is the one that pertains to practices supporting international trade. And this goes in much detail to assess the extent to which the applicable regulatory framework incorporates good practices that promote market access, practices on digital and sustainable trade, and international trade cooperation. We all understand as international trade practitioners that having an adequate legal framework is important to facilitate international trade. Not only does it ensure compliance, attract investments, and make the business environment more competitive, good practices on digital sustainable trade are also important to promote access to digital markets, innovation, reduce environmental impact, and support sustainable trade growth. Again, good practices in international trade, according to most literature that exists out there, are crucial for establishing an equitable, transparent, predictable, and secure global trading environment. The second category on regulatory restrictions on international trade assesses or pertains to the areas of international trade, goods, services, and digital trade, and follows recognized good practices. An effective regulatory framework, we all know, also pursues certain legitimate public policy objectives and may impose certain restrictions that are important to protect public safety, health, environment, as well as to address certain market failures. SPS measures, TBT measures come to mind. However, there are also certain restrictions that can create market distortions and impede trade flows, lowering import penetration and export competitiveness for trading goods, services, and digital trade. It is therefore crucial to have regulations that strike a balance between these objectives and the restrictive requirements that they impose, which must be proportional to the first two objectives. These are some of the components that we assess in the regulatory restrictions on international trade. This slide is to give some of you a quick snapshot, or to say a more practical and realistic example of what our questions look like. So far, we've spoken about our indicators in abstract. This slide gives you a glimpse of what our questions actually look. Under pillar 1, on the subcategory on digital and sustainable trade, we have questions that seek to assess the legal validity and enforceability of electronic contracts and signatures that are issued outside the country. So one of our questions, for example, seeks to assess whether the domestic legal framework legally enforces electronic contracts or signatures that are issued in a foreign country. Again, our list of questions is comprehensive, and our questions are actually distributed across 4 questionnaires. The first one being on trade in goods, the second one being on trade in services, the third in public services, and we have a 4th questionnaire on digital trade. But again, this slide is to give you a flavor and sense of how our questions look like. All our questions are binary. All our questions require a yes and no response, barring a few where numerical responses are needed, or we're asking for tariff rates, or we're asking for the de minimis value to give you an example. Moving on to pillar 2, if I may. Again, the structure of our pillars remain the same. We have the pillar, we have the category, we have subcategories, and within each subcategory, we have indicators which then conform to different questions. The first category on pillar 2 on digital and physical infrastructure assesses the implementation of trade facilitation measures on electronic systems and interoperability of services. These trade facilitation measures, as many of us know, enhance the transparency, accountability, and efficiency of clearing processes. They reduce compliance costs, the transaction costs for firms, and increase their participation in international trade. The second category on the implementation of trade facilitation measures on risk management, coordinate border management, and trusted trader programs. These trade facilitation measures enable the efficient allocation of public resources and can significantly reduce compliance and transaction costs for firms. As such, they increase safety and security in the trading process while boosting government revenues and creating a beneficial environment for both the public and the private sector. The next slide is similar to the one on pillar 1, again, to give some of you a sense of what our questions look like. For example, one of our questions on electronic systems and interoperability of services asks whether there is an operational electronic system for international trade in place. The intent of this question is to assess whether it exists an electronic single window or an integrated custom management system in the economy. It further goes on to understand the extent or the quality or the integration of this electronic system for international trade, and asks further follow-up questions on agency integration. For example, which domestic public sector agencies are fully integrated into this electronic system for international trade? For example, is the tax administration, the SPS agency, are they integrated into this electronic system? And so on and so forth, in terms of whether different stakeholders who are a part of the international trading process, are they integrated? The value of any electronic system for international trade lies in its depth, lies in the extent to which it's able to integrate many agencies, different stakeholders, and has the desired features that are recognized in literature as part of the trade facilitation agreement as those that are considered good practices. Again, our indicators are motivated and embedded in good practices that have been identified by international organizations and are considered in existing literature to be the backbone of establishing a well-functioning international trade system. With that, I'll move on to our third pillar, the one on what we call operational efficiency. Some of you who are familiar with our work in doing business might see some similarities in the components of Pillar 3 as well as those on your screen here today. Under Pillar 3, we assess the operational efficiency of exporting goods, importing goods, and engaging in digital trade. The first two categories of Pillar 3 pertain to the compliance cost and compliance time with export and import requirements. It goes without saying that increased time and cost of compliance hinders firms' ability to access the global market, representing a substantial barrier to trade in goods. Factors such as lengthy custom procedures, more time for documentary compliance, lack of coordination among border control agencies, and inadequate trade infrastructure, and limited logistics services significantly increases time and cost to comply with export and import requirements. And it is this that we aim to capture through our indicators on compliance costs and time. The third category assesses the percentage of firms in the economy that export digitally ordered goods. Again, the intent being to capture the penetration of digital trade in an economy. And again, Pillar 3, the backbone of Pillar 3, or the intent for us to include these efficiency indicators is again embedded on the importance of how mitigating operational and transactional costs has on facilitating international trade. And the last category is the one that assesses the shares of firms identifying customs and trade regulations, as well as transportation, as a major obstacle to trade. These are perception-based questions on major obstacles to international trade, capturing subjective experiences and viewpoints of firms, shedding light on the challenges that businesses face when trading internationally. I like to state that the data for Pillar 3 is collected from firm-level surveys, which I will come to in a bit on the next slide. But just wanted to say that, yes, so this would be a great moment for us to explain the different data sources or the different data collection sources for our project. Some of you who worked with data in the past, and for those who know our project, we're only good as the quality of our data. Therefore, it's very important for us to understand our different data collection sources. The data for Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, as you can see on the slide, is collected by consulting with experts from the private sector. For Pillar 1, these experts primarily include trade economists, trade lawyers, trade consultants, trade managers, and other experts, for example, in the academic field. For Pillar 2, due to the nature of the questions that are asked, these experts include trade professionals, such as freight forwarders, custom brokers, clearing agents, trade consultants, trade managers, to name a few. These experts provide valuable insights into the framework and the provision of public services from their own experience. And that's why we consider that the exercise to reach the right expert is of immense value to us, to be able to identify the expert who not only understands the regulatory framework for Pillar 1 and is able, from his or her knowledge and day-to-day operation, give us an accurate and representative assessment of the regulatory framework. And the same goes to Pillar 2. We're reaching out to trade practitioners, to trade professionals, who in their day-to-day activity are going ahead and are very familiar with some of our indicators, with some of the questions we seek to assess, so that the assessment or the response that they're giving us is not a theoretical one, but one that comes from their day-to-day experience. And for Pillar 2, and this is what I wanted to delay my earlier statement on, is that the data for Pillar 3 is collected entirely through our sister unit, the Enterprise Analysis Unit. Pillar 3 indicators or questions for Pillar 3 are collected through firm-level surveys. These surveys provide representative data on time and the cost to comply when directly importing or exporting goods, participating in cross-border trade, and firms' perception on major obstacles. A representative sample of companies captures a variation of user experience within each economy. It improves representativeness and at the same time is able to accurately capture different subjective assessments or responses across firm size, sector, to name a few. I must highlight how collecting the data on time reports through firm level survey is fundamental to capture the real experience of firms on the ground and overcome the need for narrow case study assumptions. One of the feedback that we consistently had for international trade in doing business. With that, I'll move on to a part of the presentation that I want to spend a bit more time, not only because it's exciting, but also it's something that we have made a conscious effort to disseminate after the first edition of the Be Ready report was released last year. On this slide, you'll see, so first and foremost, I want to sort of clarify that for the first Be Ready report 2024, we capture data or assess data across 50 economies worldwide. This will further be extended to 110 in pilot in rollout 2 and another 50 for rollout 3. So at the end of the first 3 years of the rollout, we should be able to have sort of a global coverage. And after the end of the rollout phase, we will then sort of engage in what's called the first non-rollout Be Ready report in 2026. But just to come back and to take you through this slide, which has sort of, it puts out certain topic scores on the international trade indicator globally. And we see from this slide that good and bad performers exist across different regions. Each of these numbers on the slide is out of 100. They represent the topic scored for an economy out of total of 100 across the 3 different pillars that we've assessed. We see this variation across different economies. We see some good performers that exist in the East Asian Pacific region with scores as high as 91. We see those that exist in Europe and Central Asia with scores that are as high as 86. And we also see some economies in the sub-Saharan Africa region with scores as high as 82. This suggests that good practices can be implemented and adopted in any context, and economies can learn from one another in their efforts to improve the business environment. On the next slide, we zoom in a bit more to see the variation of scores across different regions. ECHA, excluding OECD high-income economies. Sorry, can we go to the next slide? Great. So just on this slide, I'd like to sort of assess that this also gives us a snapshot of economies from an income perspective. And while it's not, this is not something surprising, that we see that high-income economies tend to achieve an average of high score, and it also sort of is the motivation for the inclusion it's one of the bedrock. It forms one of the reasons for Be Ready assessing some of these indicators, given its strong correlation, not causation, with GDP. It's also, what the slide sort of also indicates is that economies do not need to be rich to develop a good business environment. So while the Be Ready economy scores for international trade have strong positive association with GDP per capita, with high-income economies, as I mentioned, having an average score that is higher than those of in the low or the low middle income classification. Nevertheless, we do find in many cases examples of low-income and middle-income economies who are able to achieve high scores. For example, there are cases of Morocco, Philippines, Rwanda, and Vietnam who find themselves in the top 2 quintiles of the topic scores for international trade. Again, going back to the point that while there is a correlation between, or we do see high-income economies achieving on average higher scores, we also have cases of economies from the low income or the middle income, low middle income classification that are among the high performers on the international trade indicator. With this, I'll move to another interesting trend that we observe in our data. We see this across the Be Ready report. We see this across different indicators assessed by the Be Ready report. And we also see this for international trade, the existence of what we call a public services gap. Public services scores, and I just want to take back to what we mean by public services. These are indicators on Pillar 2, the ones that assess the public services needed for the facilitation of international trade, those that pertain to electronic systems for international trade, risk management systems, coordinated border management, trusted trader programs. So we see scores on this pillar to be lower, or they tend to be lower than the scores on regulatory framework, which in a way suggests that economies are better at enacting regulations than providing public services. The Be Ready data, as we can see on this slide, evidences the existence of what we call this public services gap across all income groups. That is, there's a notable difference between the regulatory framework score and the public services score. On this slide, you see across different income groups, we see the average Pillar 2 score for low-income economies, or for economies, or the average score for economies in every income level to be lower on Pillar 2, which are the red dots, as opposed to those in Pillar 1, the green dots. On the next slide, we see the same to exist across regions as well. Great. So here on the slide, we also see that the public services gap, not as amplified as you would have seen across income levels, also exists. Again, stating that perhaps in our data, we find that economies find it easier at enacting regulations than providing public services. And with that, I'll move on to one of the last slides in the sections that we have on general trends that we see from our data. And that's on high operational efficiency scores. So the slide that you'll see, it's indicated that economies have high operational efficiency scores, scores that are higher than the average of the other two pillars for most economies. These patterns in our assessment and in our analysis highlight the adaptability of firms in environments that are marked by deficient public services. As we saw on the last slide, we consistently see that the average economy scores on Pillar 2 are consistently lower than those on Pillar 1 on the regulatory framework, as well as those in Pillar 3 on operational efficiency. This seems to suggest that firms have, in some way or the other, have developed a coping mechanism of sorts to navigate their respective business environment, and adaptability of sorts, to name it differently. A caveat that I want to note on this particular slide, in interpreting this data, is that firms providing input for operational efficiency, as I mentioned earlier, are sampled from the formal sector and exclude very small or recently established firms. So it's very much possible that within a sample of larger and older firms, they may be less sensitive to weak regulatory and public services environment, which could then perhaps explain the high scores in operational efficiency. Moving on to what our team did consider to be a bit more interesting, given the audience that we have today. And I understand the paucity of time, and I'll try to keep it as short as possible, but give you a bit of a glimpse of what our scores or what general trends we also see from our data on Pillar 2. Pillar 2 in particular, because we understand that to be of more interest to today's audience. On electronic systems and interoperability of services, we tend to see that economies tend to score well on the availability of systems. We see that 92% of the covered economies in the first report being 50 in number, have some advanced system for international trade in place, either an electronic single window or an international system, custom management system, integrated custom management systems. And we have many examples, and if we had more time, we would have liked to go into some of them in more detail. But we see that despite a 92% existence, we have cases in upper middle income countries like Iraq and Montenegro where such systems do not exist. And interestingly, while these systems exist, scores are typically much lower and more variable insofar as the quality of these systems are concerned. Again, highlighting that there's a mismatch in terms of availability and the quality of these systems. We have up to 72% of economies that have not integrated all relevant agencies and stakeholders into this electronic system for international trade. We have 54% of those economies assessed that do not have the features that are assessed by the indicator, and 50% who do not have any of these systems that exchanges information with equivalent systems of trading partners. Similarly, in the area of transparency and availability of information, it's very telling. For example, 82% of covered economies do not have comprehensive publicly available trade information. By comprehensive, in our indicators, we have different aspects of public availability of information that we do seek to assess. And in our assessment and in our results, 82% of the covered economies do not have all this publicly available trade information. Talking about trade information portals, we see that 54% of economies do not have what we define as trade information portals. And interestingly, some of these countries are high-income economies, as well as those in the upper middle income category, lagging, such as Hungary, New Zealand, Hong Kong, some of the economies that you would expect to have these trade information portals to be in place. And lastly, we have about 20% of economies, including the likes of Barbados, who do not publish something as straightforward as the applied rates of duties, taxes, and fees, which are instrumental, again, to having a more transparent trading framework. Moving on to risk management, again, I think the trend that we see is similar to the one that we noticed for electronic systems for international trade. We have economies that tend to score well on the availability of systems. We have 90% of covered economies that have a custom risk management system in place. But again, when it comes to the quality of these systems, we see that scores tend to be lower and more variable. To give you an example, 84% of all custom risk management systems do not integrate all border control agencies. And lastly, moving on to trusted trader programs. Covered economies, again, we see a similar trend. We see that economies tend to score better on availability. In covered economies, 76% of economies have a trusted trader program. In other words, an authorized economic operator program in place for exporters and importers. And again, scores tend to be much lower and more variable insofar as quality is concerned. 60% of TTPs do not include the full set of benefits that are being assessed. 72% do not allow for electronic certification and renewal, to name a few. And with that, I'll move on to my last two slides pertaining to the results from Pillar 3. And this, again, is telling. Again, our sample is limited to 50 economies. Next year, 2 years from now, these numbers will change, and we'll be able to have something that's more telling, that's more representative, that's more global. But as far as our data stands today, again, when it comes to efficiency, when it comes to compliance with export requirements, we see a big variation. We see that countries like Bosnia and Herzegovina, El Salvador, and Lesotho it takes only 1 to 2 days to clear all border controls, whereas it takes up to 35 days in Mexico to clear all border controls. Again, the data for this is being collected through firm level surveys collected by our sister entity, the enterprise surveys. When it comes to costs, we see a huge variation as well. We see that the cost to clear all border controls can extend from as little as 2% of the value of the goods in the case of Croatia and Rwanda to as high as 38% of the value of the goods. Again, this is very telling in terms of how high operational costs can be for firms to navigate the international trading process. We see similar variation across the compliance with import requirements. In fact, it's even more enhanced. We see that it can take as less as 1 day to clear all border controls for imports in Montenegro and Lesotho, and it can take up to 60 days, virtually 2 months, for firms or for goods to clear our border control agencies. Again, highlighting the importance of mitigating transactional costs, operational times to facilitate trade. We see something similar when it comes to the cost to clear all border control agencies. 66% of the value of goods is spent by firms towards clearing all border control agencies when it comes to imports. Again, a very telling tale to be told. With that, I think I have come to the end of my PowerPoint presentation. We'd also like to invite everyone in the audience to check out our website in more detail. It has data at the very granular level. The results of the international trade data collected for the VReady 2024 report can be accessed and navigated through our website on VReady. I believe this QR code also takes you to our project's website where you can download the report, navigate the data, as well as sort of listen or see some of our Q&As that are also on our website. We also frequently publish several research and analytical outputs that the team engages in on our website. So I'd also encourage all of you who may be interested in our work to explore that. And with that, I'd again like to thank each one of you for listening, for your patience. And I'll hand it back to David to then open up, I guess, the floor for Q&As. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Varun. That was very interesting indeed. And I'm sure that we do have a number of questions from our audience. I'll ask those that do have a question to raise their hands so that we can do this in an orderly manner. I might kick off though by asking about you on one of the later slides. You talk about the time to clear border controls, and I'll be interested to see how this integrates with other World Bank indicators, such as the TRS, which is helping the WCO to revise at the moment. So the time release studies. Do you compare the results that you receive through your surveys with instruments such as TRS?
Thanks, David. I think that Nuno wants to come in on this one, but that's okay.
Thank you very much, Professor David, and everyone in the audience. In fact, when we were designing the indicators, we did check other sources of data for the statistics available for compliance with border controls. Right now, after the first round of data collection, which was just published last month, we haven't yet compared the results with other which are published in other by other institutions, including the TRS from the WCO, or the statistics available also from governments. What we do know from our previous research is that the methodologies don't exactly match. So it is natural that the numbers will not be reflecting what we see on their side, will not necessarily match and reflect what we see on our side. And also one point that must be emphasized is that the numbers that Varun just mentioned, the figures, they reflect the median. So they are the median values of data collected by the firms. We want, in fact, in the future, as Varun was mentioning, we do want to produce some research outcomes, particularly focusing also on the operational efficiency. And it is likely then that we will compare the results that we have with those in other the TRS of WCO, and also other organizations that publish information on compliance at the borders. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much for that. That'll be an interesting one because there's a number of administrations around the world that are looking to measure their efficiency through TRS. So I might just put in a request here that at the moment, because the World Bank has gone through the WCO in relation to TRS and the system is held by the WCO. WCO is not allowing non-WCO members to have access to that system, which has been supported by the World Bank. And I think based on the World Bank's mission, I think that should be opened up to those countries that are not currently WCO members. So I'll just put in that request because I know that there's some active issues there, but it's good to see that you are cross-referencing. So thank you for that. Now I will go. I know you're not Paul. It's not Paul Hansen, but please.
No, it's not Paul Hansen. It's Pamela.
Please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I am Pamela Ugas. I work with Paul Hansen, and he unfortunately could not be here with us today, but I am representing AMTAT. And so I have a question regarding the Pillar 2 and Pillar 3. For me, Pillar 2 is very clear that it's trade facilitation, but there were some aspects in Pillar 3 that could also be trade facilitation, because you were talking about requirements and also the time. So as we know, trade facilitation is about reduction of cost and time. So I was wondering if also we can consider that trade facilitation is partly in Pillar 3. This is one question. Then I have another question regarding Pillar 2. When you mentioned that these systems, and for me it seems a little bit broad, because you can include single windows or maybe an automated system that is only for one agency, for example, customs or Ministry of Trade or sanitary phytosanitary when they have to give to give a certificate. So it can be quite. Can you hear me well? Because I hear some echo.
I think you're breaking up. Maybe if you want to repeat the second question again, if possible.
Yes, yes, sure. I was talking about the Pillar 2 when you mentioned systems. For me, it seems a little bit broad, because it can be from a single window that is quite complex and very comprehensive to any system that is available just in one agency. So I was wondering if in the survey, if it is possible to break it down by, for example, can I search single window, the countries that only have single window, the countries that only have, for example, SPS, electronic certificates, and so on? Because if we talk about electronic systems, yeah, that's why it's very high, because it's very broad. But we know that in reality, countries, the ones that really have one single window, one comprehensive electronic system, are very few. There are not many. Then I have another question also. I was a little bit surprised by the results on Pillar 2 for Latin America, because they were, I think it was higher than Asia. And so I wanted to know how did you compare the regions? And these are my three questions. Thank you. And congratulations on the great job.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I could start taking a crack, and I can then of course ask my team members to support me in that. The first one on Pillar 2 and Pillar 3, and why Pillar 2 is what we consider trade facilitation. I think Pillar 3 is also an offshoot in a way of how the existence of public services then translates into operational efficiency. So while we do name it in terms of nomenclature differently, I guess the two go hand in hand. It's only when one has those public services in place can those then reflect into better operational efficiency under Pillar 3. So we do not see the two as disconnected. In one way, we could also argue that the operational efficiency under Pillar 3 is also reflective of better trade facilitation, or better trade facilitation also leads to better operational efficiency as it then assessed and measured by Pillar 3 on operational efficiency. On your last question on Pillar 2 results, LAC higher than East Asian Pacific, again, these are initial trends. As we mentioned, our sample includes a list of 50 economies. We see these trends change as we increase our sample size. I think a best assessment to do these regional comparisons across international trade scores or pillars would be best done when we have a bigger sample. But again, as we mentioned, we do see certain results. We are presenting them today. And yes, regional averages with a sample of 50 does not give us the best picture. On trade facilitation systems, I think you make an excellent point, and it's something that we've over the last year also struggled, debated, deliberated. We had these questions drafted differently at a point in time. We assessed electronic single windows, different from integrated custom management systems. And you're absolutely right that there can be economies, instances, frameworks where you can have a very advanced electronic single window, and those where you have a smaller, simple window pertaining to a particular agency within the government. And I understand Nuno also wants to add to this, but I think where we're able to find a common ground is to make sure that on one hand, we are giving credit to these advanced electronic single windows, but also acknowledging instances of other electronic systems for trade, such as integrated custom management systems, which may or may not, which may in some cases also have very advanced features that electronic single windows have. But just to sort of take that a bit further, our assessment of features is what's crucial. So while in our first question, we do seek to assess whether there is an electronic single window for international trade, our subsequent questions, which go into agency integration, stakeholder integration, existing features, I think that is I think that's what's crucial. And that is what I guess assesses the extent, the quality of these electronic systems for international trade. But I'd also hand it over to Nuno to supplement on this particular aspect of electronic single window and simple systems of trade, and on any other aspect he considers.
So thank you, Varun. I know there are more questions in line, but so just to be quick on the points to add. The first question on trade facilitation, it's absolutely correct, and as Varun mentioned, and we can also extend the same principle for Pillar 1. The regulatory framework is also designed for trade facilitation, how we measure it. So all the pillars, in fact, interconnect. On the third question, as we jump, the issue on sample is really important, and you can see in our website the economies we covered. Those we lack were Costa Rica, El Salvador, Colombia, and Peru, which we can argue that are also a little bit ex ante. We expect them to be scoring a bit over other economies in the region as well. So this may also explain a little bit why the sample may slightly bias the results for the first year on the comparisons with other regions. And on the issue of the electronic systems, you are absolutely correct, and Varun already mentioned it. I want to note that this work is the work of 3 years that we are putting forward here. And in those 3 years, we tested many different variations of the questions. We had a testing stage where we had points on the customs management systems, electronic single windows, all separate. Some were working better than others. Some were also not easily explainable for scoring purposes. And we want to be also very easy to understand. We need to be as simple as possible, but as complex as needed to measure this. And so in the end, this version that we have now is agnostic in terms of the system. So that's why we put it as electronic systems. But then the issue is, as Varun mentioned, the features that are there. The point to add here more than anything is that we do take customs as the central focal point of the administration in this area. And so what we measure is then the integration of other agencies, into the system where customs is part of. It's not necessarily if it's electronic single window, it doesn't need to be just customs the route, but it must be there as well, and other agencies can add. We also want to give credit then to advanced SQL models where other agencies are also integrated there, and they should have also a benefit in the scores, let's say, to showcase. So these were just the first one. Thank you, Varun.
Thanks, Nuno, and thanks for that. I think there are other questions as well. I see Andrew.
Mikhail,
Andre.
I think is next. Yes. Mikhail?
Yes. So Varun, just about these three pillars. So one is regulation, and then the second one is facilitation. It seems to be like public sector, and then the third one, I guess, can be attributed to sort of private sector. But I was in one of the earlier slides, you had the number of indicators for each of the pillars. So the first two had like over 100 indicators, while the last one only had 7. I'm wondering why such a big discrepancy, and how do you interpret it? And yeah, basically, how did it happen that there was such a huge difference?
Thanks, Mikhail. Great question. I don't think they were by intent, but I think we ended up having so many indicators on the regulatory framework. But just to confirm, I think our second pillar is not pertaining to the public sector, but more towards public services. And again, all this data is collected from the private sector. But the reason for having sort of many different indicators across different pillars, I think when this work started, our objective was to identify as many good practices as there were pertaining to having a good, transparent, predictable regulatory framework. And as we sort of went on our work in the last 3 years, we identified a number of established good practices by sort of the WCO, by the WTO, by many agencies who are considered, I guess, the ones establishing or laying down the rule or the good practices through many agreements, the Trade Facilitation Agreement to name one, many WTO covered agreements to name a few. And I think our intent was to not limit ourselves in terms of the indicators or the good practices that we wanted to measure. The idea was to cover as many as possible that would be relevant in terms of our methodology, in terms of our scope. And so by design, the idea was not to have an equal number of indicators, but from a project methodology perspective, a decision was taken to have each pillar weighed equally. So despite having more indicators under pillar 1, the proportional value of pillar 1 vis-a-vis the entire score is still 33%. Yes, it's true that having more indicators and the same relative weight reduces the sort of the proportional weight of each indicator in a particular pillar. But that, I guess, is just an implication of us trying to make sure that we have as many good practices we can assess in the pillar 1, as well as under pillar 2. As our work goes on and we do identify more good practices that we think we can cover under pillar 2, they will just be additional indicators that we add. So again, it's not by nature of design, it's purely by virtue of the work that we've done in the last 3 years to identify good practices that exist, that can be categorized as those that exist within the regulatory framework, as well as those that we can consider as public services. So, I mean, I'd like to sort of, but again, Nuno wanted to compliment.
Yes, thank you, Mikhail. That's a great question. And Varun already touched main points of pillar 1 and 2. But your point focused particularly on pillar 3 and a discrepancy between the number of indicators in pillar 3 vis-a-vis the other 2. And here there are two main reasons. First one is by design, which is pillar 3 works as a summation of pillar 1 and 2. Basically, is how firms use the public services that are made available to them, the electronic single window, the information, etc., to comply with the regulations in pillar 1. So the first, we have to see it as a combination of the other 2 in practice for firms, the summation. And having said that, we still wanted to have more indicators at the beginning. Let me tell you, we have more questions. And it comes to the second reason, which is it is incredibly expensive to run enterprise service across all over the world with the questions that we have for the whole Be Ready. So even though we started with our colleagues in enterprise analysis team, we started asking for 15, 20 different questions and indicators, all of the topics in business ready did so. And don't forget that enterprise service is already an established product which had more than 100 questions in their survey already. Now we're adding another 100 plus questions with all the topics in Be Ready, and we had to, due to resource constraints, start cutting the questions into those that we would say these are the most important ones. And also on this note, the question on the perception-based, the indicators on perception-based questions, they were already part of enterprise service. So those were not even added by us. If you see, the questions that we added are 6, 7, if you count filters. So that's also the reason why we have less indicators on pillar. 2 main reasons: summation of pillar 1 and 2, and then resource constraints.
Thanks for that explanation. We've got, we're running out of time now, but I think we've got time for one more question from Andrew, please.
Yeah. Thanks, David. And thank you for the presentation, which is quite nice to have it summarized in an hour, and that could have not been easy. I'm just reflecting on what you presented, and I would welcome a view on that, and especially by outlining the 3 pillars, which would suggest you coming from other perspectives and building those up. And I can see how pillar 1 and 2 are complementary and might describe, certainly in context of trade facilitation, compliance with international commitments such as those of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, or those more specific to customs administrations that might be captured in many countries through time release studies. But then on the ground, what matters probably for most businesses in terms of transaction costs and also benefits, that would probably be pillar 3, if I would interpret what you presented accurately, because that's where costs materialize, and it's the sort of cost you might want to mitigate. But if that is the objective, then there's always the same challenge is when you compare like for like. So commitments that are pursued, let's say for, I'm just taking random trusted traders, for example. In some countries, there might be export focused, and other countries, there might be import focused, and some countries would be a mix of both. Single windows, yes, normally focused towards customs administrations, but there are a number of countries where it's focused towards maritime administrations, such as Finland, for example. And you highlighted Montenegro as an example where you can clear goods very quickly. In fact, I believe you can clear goods before the goods arrive, so they have pre-arrival procedures. So maybe you have to have a minus figure there of -1 hour or something like that. So when you're in that sort of environment, I admire the admission that the World Bank has here, but the narratives around it, I'm wondering how you're trying to reflect that and bring it out. And I would imagine certainly on the economic side, pillar 3, that's sort of where so much can be strengthened, and on the qualitative side, rather than just offering the classic figures where you look at distance between variables. And views would be wonderful from you here.
Thanks, Andrew. I think these are great points, and I think again, as we sort of extend this rollout for another year, I mean, this is the feedback that we're looking for, and I think this also, you're absolutely right. I guess your understanding of pillar 1 and 2 being complementary, and how you see that reflect the compliance with the DFA is very accurate, and I think we couldn't agree with you more on how the P3 estimates are the ones that reflect the practice on the ground. I think you also make a valid points on how certain trade programs could be export focused, others that could be import focused. But again, I think going back to just on what our exercise means and where we are coming from. Yes, there could be many aspects that are country focused, that are applicable to certain other countries while not to others. But I think the value of this exercise lies in comparability and actionability. So I think that goes back to us in terms of how important it is for us to design indicators that are comparable across economies. And yes, we're then in a way limited or restricted to stick by the established good practices that do exist, that have been well established. And well, in an ideal case scenario, we also have, I think this is also a pitch for some of us who do not know some of the work that's being done by sister unit on some national. So they also have a parallel exercise on Be Ready that goes to assess different in-country variations or within country variations that assesses these frameworks across different cities to give some sort of variability across a country even. But I take your point fully. I think going forward, we also have to find a way to see in terms of our dissemination efforts, in terms of our research efforts, how we want to present this data, what are the key messages, the key trends that we want to put out there for the community. But again, I think also the value of our product is, or the intent of our product is to put this data out there for the public. It's for us to put it out there for researchers to use this granular data to the way they want to, with the intent they want to, and I guess the interpretation of this data is also left to them, how they would want to interpret it in a particular way. And I think we've been very conscious as we've sort of graduated from doing business into Be Ready about the importance of making this granular data available in public domain for everyone to have a look at. We do have our methodology. We want to put out there how this data was collected so that everyone's on the same page and you do understand how these questions were asked. But again, I think we also want to encourage the research community, the consulting community to use this data and take it from there. But Nuno wants to.
Yeah, just two points if I may. The issue, your points are absolutely valid. I would say what we want to strike is even the operational side, which is the most important. I think we can agree for businesses and firms, but it's not in a vacuum. It does not come out of anywhere. And that was one of the criticisms that we had in doing business in trading cross borders. We were only measuring the costs and times in the vacuum, and also with a very narrow case study assumption, which was not representative for many economies. So with the business strategy, we try to fill that vacuum with the quality of the regulatory framework and the quality of these services, with established good practices. The idea is also to be standardized. So you are entirely right. Some economies may focus more on exports and imports, but the established good practice in our community would be to have present-value programs for both sides, because they are complementary, right? They move. So that's why that's how we measure it. And the second very quick point was that Montenegro, in fact, scores very high. It's the one that just has 1 day to clear imports in the time. And the issue is because we do measure the pre-time. Enterprise service only measured the customs time, and what we were trying to push to them is we need to measure the pre-customs fraud, the pre-arrival at the border times, and we also need to measure the post cost if there are other agencies involved. So this has been a little bit of a struggle we have internally, but our data in fact try to measure the whole time. And there's also one more point I have to say. We have limitations, and particularly on this operational efficiency, we have many limitations. I must just we are very knowledgeable about this area. So we have limitations in terms of the value. So we are not asking the firms for them to take the volume of the shipments that they are considering. We are only asking them for their typical transaction and the fraction of the cost for that transaction. We have limitations in understanding let's say, no, we do have the data, but which modes of transportation are used. We cannot slice our samples because we don't have enough observations in small economies to do so. We can do so for the US or for Brazil. So we have many limitations. The good thing, as Varun mentioned, is the data right now is available for everyone, the granular data. And so you, as researchers, we also, as with our research output side, we can also collaborate on that. This is an invitation that I want to draw here. We can also go a little bit deeper into the cases where you do have the data to work on. Megan, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for David, Inku, Miguel for organizing it. It's really a great experience. And I'm really happy to be here with you. We are very happy.
Well, thank you very much. And I should also thank some of our audience. We thought we were doing rough here at it's now gone 2 a.m. in Australia, and I thought that was pretty rough for us. But I see we have some friends from the Pacific, so it's 3 a.m. for them. So they've what you've presented has obviously been worth staying up for, and it's been a great treat for us. Thank you very much. It must have been very difficult to find an effective replacement for doing business. I mean, you've been through quite a traumatic time there in the World Bank in terms of the world of doing business, and I think you've come up with a terrific tool here, and I really look forward to seeing how it develops as additional countries come on board and as you refine it as you go along. So it is a tremendous initiative. So congratulations on that. I really like the way you've approached it as well. I mean, we may have IT systems in place, regulatory frameworks, we might have risk management systems in place, but it's how does this operate in practice? What's the quality of what is actually in place? And I think that's where you've put a lot of your effort and a lot of your focus, and I think that's a really good thing to see. And as you say, I think it's going to be a rich source of research, and we look forward to delving into the details as they continue to be rolled out. I might even suggest that Varun, you and your team may wish to put together a small article for the World Customs Journal, just to perhaps to track the journey that you've been on to get to this point. But look, on behalf of everybody, once again, thank you very much to Varun and the team. I think you've done a wonderful job, and it's a pleasure to have you present what you've achieved to us here today. So thank you very much. And I know we're virtual, but we can probably clap our hands in some way. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, David, for those words. It means a lot to us, and we can't wait to come back next year if given an opportunity to present the second report as well.
Excellent. Well, we will hold you to that, and the INCU and all its members look forward to supporting you as you take this forward. So thank you once again. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I think you'll agree it's been a great presentation, and I wish you all a great rest of your days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.